Hello, beautiful people, and thank you for joining today's live stream. Really excited about the guest that we have on today. His name is Wayne Elsey, and he has a really incredible story and has been involved in numerous different social impact organizations. And today we're going to be discussing, two of his organizations, namely, Sneakers for Good and Funds to Org. And before we bring our guest on, I just wanted to touch base, as it's been a little while since I've connected with you all. We did have our really successful Pedal for Progress Florida initiative. Thank you for following along and engaging in the content. And we're going to continue to coordinate with more nonprofits in different states across the country. So if you followed along with Pedal for Progress Florida, or you followed along with Pedal for Progress California last year, and you have a nonprofit that you think would be interested in being interviewed, being a stop on one of our next rides, please reach out to us, and we would love to start that conversation so we can begin to make plans, as we have not yet announced the next state that I'm going to be riding through. Hopefully it won't be as hot as Florida in May, but I will do whatever I can. And so just with that brief update on Cherry Willow, I'd love to bring on and introduce everyone to our guest today, Wayne. Hey, Wayne, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. And what an amazing bike trip you had. I mean, 100-degree weather in May down here, and I live in Orlando, and certainly didn't stop by here because we're not along the coast, but great job, man. Great job, and really, I can't say I felt your pain, but amazing feat you did with that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a fun way to connect the stories, and also transportation is a large barrier when it comes to people that are homeless. If they don't have access to a car, it limits their ability to provide for themselves, or what housing opportunities they can get to, even getting groceries and food. So biking is another way to bring visibility and just a different perspective to some of the challenges that people who are homeless face, that if you haven't been in that situation, you wouldn't necessarily know.
Right. No, absolutely. And homelessness is a huge issue, and it's really commendable to you guys to really make an effort to do this in a unique way that can really impact people, because there's a natural disaster happening in people's lives every day, and we don't know what that is. We may say hello to somebody, or we may see somebody, but there is something going on in everybody's life every day, and certainly to be homeless is a major issue that needs to be resolved here in America.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we're all much closer to it than we realize. And part of the goal of our work is to help people see themselves in the people that homelessness affects. And so we coordinate with a lot of different nonprofits, not just homelessness-focused nonprofits. And we actually were in Orlando during the ride, and it was a wonderful trip, and a lot of great organizations that we connected with, for sure.
That's great. Well, next time you're here, you're welcome here. So
thank you. And I would love if you could just maybe briefly introduce yourself to the audience and give a little bit of background. I think that would be really helpful just for everyone in our Cherry Willow audience who's being introduced to you, to get an opportunity to meet you and hear from you a little bit of your story.
Yeah, well, thanks, Matt. I'm 61 years old, and I've had one career for all the years I've been working since 15. It's been the shoe business. And literally, I started off as a stock boy in a shoe store, and finished high school, and basically kept growing through the shoe industry to where I am today. Just to kind of back that up a little bit, I went through a really tragic time at the age of 16 and 17, where I literally was ready to commit suicide. I had a tough upbringing, had a very tough relationship with my mother, and basically just struggled with life. And I had made a decision one day that I was going to commit suicide. And, as I mentioned earlier, there's a natural disaster in people's life every day, and nobody knows that. Nobody knew what I was going through, whether it be my peers in school or whatever. But my school teacher looked at me when I went into homeroom. Mrs. Bush is her name. And she said, "Look, boy, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you matter. You can do anything you want to put your mind to it, and don't let the world get you down." And literally, that snapped me out of it. And that really made me today the person I am today. If you look all around the country, you'll see "You Matter" signs up. You'll see our trucks that say "You Matter." Anything with our branding has "You Matter" on it. But anyhow, that's really the first kind of person that made a difference in my life. And then I went to work in the shoe business, and I was kind of like Al Bundy. A lot of people don't know what Al Bundy is, but he was like a famous shoe salesman that was married to Peg and had a couple kids, whatever. But I sold shoes, and I worked my way up to be vice president of a company called Stride Right at a very young age for the retail division, from starting off just as a stock boy, and then through that moved through other companies and was president, CEO, actually started a company, sold a company, etc. And then really in 2004, the Asian tsunami happened. And again, keep in mind, I'm president and CEO of a shoe company at the time, and the tsunami happened. And I saw on the newscast the next day this single shoe that floated up on the shore. And that, Matt, that wouldn't have recognized to you or really been a big deal to you, but it bothered me. And I looked at it, I said, you know what? These people lost everything. They lost everything, including their shoes. And I said, what am I going to do about this? So I went to bed that night. I woke up the next day. I said, dude, you got to do something about this. This is December 26, 2004. This tsunami happened. People lost everything. What are you going to do? So I started collecting shoes. And literally within 30, 45, 60 days, we had 250,000 pairs of shoes shipped to Southeast Asia. And
Wow.
never thought much more about that. Went back to work, running the CEO, again, running the company as CEO of a shoe brand. And, I just had my heart tugging the whole time. I'm like, dude, all you know is shoes. Well, then we had this big awakening a couple years later with Katrina. And Katrina happened. And I said, you know what, Wayne, if you could do this for people on the other side of the world, you could do this for people a couple hundred miles from where you live. So we started collecting shoes again. I started a website called katrinashoes.org. And man, I saw things that I never really could imagine seeing right here in America. And there were homeless people. There were people that lost everything. And what I learned really quickly is that a natural disaster doesn't discriminate. I was standing on the beach with a couple, and they said, you see this ugly pink tile right here? And I'm like, yeah. And the guy says, or the woman says, my husband picked that out. That was the kitchen in our $2 million home we had on the ocean. So I learned there that a natural disaster did not discriminate against anybody. So I collected shoes. We distributed over 1 million pairs of shoes. Again, went back to work after that. Didn't think much more about it. But again, I had this tugging to me. And I sat down one day on a napkin. And I said, you know what? There's a bigger opportunity here than just helping tsunami, just helping Katrina. There's a bigger opportunity here. And I drew a logo out that looked like a shoe. And I said, there's a name for this. It's called Souls for Souls. And I put a halo above it. And I said, we are going to be here to change the world one prayer at a time, no matter what that meant at the time, because I didn't know. So I got a couple of friends of mine involved, got some other people involved, set the organization up. And literally, everybody was supporting me. The shoe industry was supporting me. The people on all different NGOs were coming around and supporting me. And people were saying, look, this makes perfect sense. So I funded the original operation, got it up and running, and then grew it from there from $0 to $74 million in 5 years. And very, very, very quite successful. But one of the things we did was two things. I said from the beginning, we are going to be a disaster relief for people. but also local relief for people because, like you mentioned, the homelessness problem is a huge issue, and people don't realize that it could be somebody right down the street from us. But outside of that, I said in developing nations, as I learned in 2010 in Haiti, that there is people around the world that could re-commerce used shoes and basically sell them. So we formulated a whole international effort starting in Haiti with 500 people, where we gave them 100 pair of shoes and said, go out there and sell them and make money and come back and buy from us. So my goal was then, and my goal today is to give people a hand up versus a handout with opportunity, just like Mrs. Bush gave me, and just like what you're doing at Cherry Willow.
Wow, I mean it's an incredible story, Wayne, and you shared a lot of really important work that you've done, and I love that you kind of capped it with Mrs. Bush, as I feel like that's men's mental health in general, but men's mental health I feel like is a field that can be really challenging for people to be vulnerable about. I know mental health is a huge part of my story as well. My parents thought that I was suicidal when I was young. I had wrapped myself in like a seatbelt in the car, and I don't think I was intending to kill myself. I think it was more like a cry for help that I didn't know how to articulate. And
wow,
there's been numerous family members and loved ones that have had battles with mental health. I've seen family members that are bipolar during manic episodes, and it's always like what I want Cherry Willow to be about. And what those moments showed me was that we need to show up for people with unconditional love. And I think the point of having a hand up for them rather than a hand out, our goal at Cherry Willow is to empower people, to be the best versions of themselves. Where if you've read some of the content that I put on the website and the blogs, I talk a lot about light. I believe that there's a light within each of us that we are meant to shine on the world. And so I'd love to maybe give you an opportunity to expand upon like how impactful having someone that was looking out for you, and then how did you go on to make the decision to carry what she did for you forward to now go on and have positively impacted hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, all over the world?
Yeah, well, thanks. Well, a couple of thoughts to that, and a couple, kind of expand because there's still a 20-year life span in there. So October of 2011, I let my board know that I was going to be leaving because of medical issues. And it wasn't anything to do with my mental health, other than the fact that I was exhausted, I was beat, I was just absolutely just exhausted. And my doctor said to me very candidly, who was a friend, he goes, Wayne, as a friend, I'm going to tell you, give it up because you got 6 months. As a medical professional, I'm going to tell you, you need to slow down, you need to refocus your life, or you're going to die probably 6 months from now.
Wow.
And I took that to heart. So I let my board know that February, March, April of the following year of 2012, I'd be leaving. And I did. And I literally moved to Florida. I bought a house in October of 11 in preparation for this after I let them know I was leaving, helped them with some succession planning discussions, and moved to Florida, sitting on the beach and just thinking. And quite honestly, I was finishing my 7th book at the time to kind of wrap out that part of the life. And I was sitting there, and a friend of mine called and says, Wayne, I need your help with something. And I said, well, you know what? I'm not working right now. I'm going to take a year off. I really need to have a sabbatical. I really need to work on Wayne because Wayne's not in a good place. And Wayne had gained 80 pounds, which is unhealthy. And I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5" and gaining 80 pounds. I could hide it okay, but I couldn't hide it really well. And basically, I said, no, I won't. Really don't want to get involved. And so he incentivized me to help him start his company and kind of give me something to challenge my mind and stuff like that, versus being a vegetable on the beach, watching the waves and everything that I was doing every day, writing this 7th book that I did. And then I went to a conference, And the conference was in Tampa, and we went to Tampa, and I was asked to speak there and basically sign my books and stuff like that about the nonprofit space. And I'd written one in 2010 called Almost Isn't Good Enough, which is a phenomenal book. That I'm really redoing that plan for 2028 because it talks a lot about the human connection. And not to get off topic, but we lost a lot about the human connection during COVID. And we went to doing things like this. But last week I was in London and I did multiple interviews one-on-one with people. And I'm like, wow, this is what it's all about. This is what it was then, and this is what it really should be now with what we have versus the Zoom, which is fine. Don't get me wrong, but I think we really miss the human connection. So I went to this conference. I did my deal, and I was thinking at the time because I've always owned a marketing company. I said, you know what? Maybe one of the niches we go after is the nonprofit space. And I learned really quickly that the nonprofit space needed money really quickly. I mean, dude, super quickly. I mean, I would ask how many people have a website, and there would be, out of 700 people I spoke to, there would be maybe 5, 6, 10%. I don't know what the number was that raised their hand, but it didn't look like a lot. And then how many people have a Facebook page, and how often do you update it, and all this kind of stuff. And the blank looks on their faces was amazing. So after I left there, or after I got done with my talk, I started talking to people. I stuck around for about an hour and a half and signed some books. And I learned that nonprofits needed money in the worst way. And I left there and I drove from Tampa to Orlando, which is about, with Disney traffic, a 2-hour drive. It should be an hour. But in Lakeland, which is halfway in between, and Lakeland, by the way, was just on the news as one of the fastest growing cities in the country. In Lakeland, I got a phone call. And that phone call was from somebody from Haiti. And their exact words were, Wayne, it's John. Hope you're doing well. Love you like a brother. I need your help. And I said, John, what do you need, man? I said, whatever you need. He goes, I need more shoes. He goes, you set me up in business down here, and I'm not getting the shoes that I was getting from the charity you started and left. And can you help me out? I said, John, let me see what I can do. I'll talk to the board. I'll give them a call. I said, but really, I have nothing, really control there anymore. I'll see what I can do. Trust me, I'll figure something out, but I'll definitely make some calls for you. I got home, and I'm telling this story because you got Tampa, Lakeland, and Orlando. Lakeland's in the middle. When I got home, I was in the shower, taking a shower. I said, you know what? There's a business model. And the business model is I can pay the charities, the nonprofits, the schools, the civic groups, and I can fund them to collect gently worn, used, and new shoes. And then I can sell them and remarket them in developing nations in a very big way. And I literally got out of the shower, pumped up, told my girlfriend at the time what it transpired, because she was with me down there and she heard me get the call from John. And I said, I think it should be called Funds to Orgs. All we're going to do is funds organizations with shoes. So we called it Funds to Orgs, which today is the largest shoe drive fundraising company in the U.S. And basically what we do is we partner with thousands of people that collect gently worn, used, and new shoes. We provide them all the materials, all the marketing, and a coach to support them along the way. And then we ship those shoes by containers from one of our 13 consolidation points around the country to developing nations, to people on the ground that are marketing these shoes in micro business, and it's changing people's lives in a huge way. I just had a book come out in May called The Reuse Economy. And in there, we actually took some time and interviewed some of the people. And there's people in there saying, hey, this has really helped me get my kids to college. This has really helped me build a house for my first house. And there's one woman in there that said, if I didn't have the 3 to 4 to 5 pair of shoes to sell a day, I would be selling my body. And I'm like, wow, what we're doing is making a huge difference in people's lives by funding nonprofits, okay, then selling them in developing nations to create businesses, by employing people here in the USA. So we got our USA employees, and we have all the people that are employed that weren't working before, most likely, or starving or whatever in developing nations, and also keeping things out of landfills. And so far, this has been a win-win, win-win-win-win for all those aspects by really taking something that I knew, the shoe business, doing it in a different way by buying and then selling, and then really, really building these people up to create businesses that right now, Matt, you would not believe when I ship a load of shoes to Cambodia, for example, they're sleeping there overnight to get their couple bags of shoes. There's something so simple as making a huge difference in people's lives there, making a difference in the 30-some employees I have here in America, as well as keeping things out of landfills, and really just creating the micro business and the micro entrepreneurs around the world, which we estimate right now is 4,000 to 5,000 people.
Wow, that is not a small amount. And I love the synergistic nature of what you've built, and again, like you kind of described it as win-win-win, right? And like nonprofits, I think are still facing a lot of similar challenges to what you articulated when you first started, where they're struggling for funding and looking for other opportunities to fundraise. And something that I've noticed in my work with other nonprofits is that they have a tremendous hearts, always incredible stories,
Yep.
but they don't always have the business acumen to market those stories to people that are maybe in the communities that they operate in and are not receiving those direct services.
That's right.
And so, that's where the idea for me came from with Cherry Willow was, I had a background in marketing and branding, consulting with primarily new car dealerships. And I started to help them with apparel to provide a consistent professional appearance of all of the staff. And, when you look at the psychology of it, the trust actually increases when you have that additional visibility and that same expectations across, all the different departments. And I wanted to take that knowledge and experience and be able to help something that's more impactful, in the nonprofit world, which is really where my heart has always been. But I think that I'm very blessed to have like the business background and be able to come in and support these wonderful organizations, add apparel as a fundraising mechanism, and then also, help them to increase their visibility, which I think is what, to one of your earlier points, we are missing that human person-to-person connection now more than ever. And like for me, I can always find a positive reframe, as I became very skilled at that because of some of the life experiences that I've had. But like you mentioned COVID as a time where we all were isolated. But I now think it's also a time that we have a shared collective experience where this was something that no matter where you were in the world, it impacted you in a very similar way. And we recognize that isolation. And, I'm a single father. I have 3 little ones. I'm currently reading a book called The Anxious Generation. And, it's about how like connecting through screens rather than, as kids just going out and playing has really impacted the mental health of the youth. And so, just bringing communities together, making those connections in person, it's more and more valuable. And something, like you said about just a shoe drive, giving someone a pair of shoes that helps them have that dignity and then that connection with the community, that there are people out there that care about them, that want to support them, and that want to see them succeed.
That's right. It's funny you say you were in marketing. I don't think I knew that, but I was very impressed. First of all, the Willow logo you have on all the clothing is awesome. And I'm a marketing guy. I mean, through and through, I may have been in the shoe business, but at the end of the day, my expertise is marketing and marketing strategy. But the Willow's there. And the other cool thing I really noticed was your superheroes team page, which really is cool. I mean, so hats off to you. Yeah, getting back to what you're saying, I mean, it's all about making a difference in somebody's life. If you look at, doing something so simple, my grandkids every year, we're packing backpacks next week, and we go around and we find homeless people and we give them a backpack. And in that backpack is toiletries, it's food, it could be snacks, it could be whatever. But just that interaction, and we're careful because you never know the situation or potential mental illness, whatever. But I'm teaching them at 9, 11, and 13. I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years. That you don't realize how good you got it. And by the way, get out off your phone, like you talked about, and get out in the yard and play. Because when you and I were growing up, Matt, and I'm, at least 5 years older than you, but or 50, or who knows. When we were growing up, we played outside. We didn't have phones. And one of the big things I'm involved in the philanthropic space myself is human trafficking. Human trafficking is unbelievable, but the amazing thing about human trafficking is the white van that we feared that was running around in our neighborhoods before looking for kids is in our living room, and it's on their iPhone.
Yeah.
And I had a person in from Kenya a few months ago, and I told Carrie, I said, Carrie, this human trafficking thing, I just got back from Costa Rica, and I'm involved in a human trafficking charity down there, and I met this girl that was 12 years old that was trafficked by her parents, and they found her with a bag of clothes and 102 condoms in it. And it just made me sick. And Carrie told me, I literally cried. I said, this is a sick world that we live in. And I said, right there, that was her parents being so desperate, and right here in America, it's our iPhones with all these games and roadblocks and whatever you want to call them, and different games that kids are playing that are having interactions with whack jobs, that are looking for kids. But Carrie told me one thing that just really made me feel good. She looked me in the eye, and just like Mrs. Bush, she said, Wayne, you know what? The work you do by getting shoes in developing nations and creating businesses and opportunities is keeping people from trafficking their kids. Because you have saved more lives than you realize, more kids' lives. So don't beat yourself up about what you can do. Look at what you've done and build upon that. And I really thought about that. And I talked to some people. And when that woman that we interviewed for the book that came out last month in May, 2 months ago, she said, I would be selling my body if I didn't have those 3 or 4 pair of shoes sold a day, which means she would be selling her kid in theory if she had one. So the little things that you're doing, the little things that we're doing, I mean, we're a for-profit social enterprise. We're not a nonprofit, but you know what? It's all about helping people. It's all about making the difference in somebody's life every day for me. I'm working with my publishing company. I have a new book coming out in October. It's with the founder of Reebok. He's 91 years old and I'm 61. And we're writing a book called Reebok to Reuse. And we're excited about that. I just got back from London with meetings and interviews and stuff like that. I'm really, dotting the I's and crossing the T's on that. But I'm really excited about a book that I'm just got approved for 27. It's called The Golden Rule is the Hope of the World. That if we all think about the Golden Rule, what that means, that's not a religious statement. That's not anything other than treat people like you want to be treated. And basically going back to the homeless people, I mean, don't be afraid of them. Get off the couch, do something with them, buy them a meal. There's been many people that have approached me around the world that say, hey, will you give me money? I said, no, I won't give you money, but let's go have a meal. And we'll sit down at McDonald's or a shack on the side of the road. Or even one instance here in Orlando, I wrote a book about this called Get Off the Couch, where this guy asked me for money. I said, dude, I'm not going to give you any money. And there was 50 people standing outside waiting to get in. And I said, but I'll buy you the best steak in town. It's at this restaurant here called Linda's La Cantina. And he goes, I don't want it. I'm like, what do you mean you don't want it? He goes, I can't. He goes, I just need the money. I said, why do you need money? He goes, I can't get a job. I said, why can't you get a job? Anyhow, he ended up walking off, frustrated, whatever, because they wouldn't do it. And people around me were just like, I can't believe you did that. And I can't believe he didn't accept your meal. So I went on a quest. This is a funny thing, and I'll be glad to send you the book or make it available to your audience online for free for download. But it's called Get Off the Couch. I got 3 jobs in 2 days. Number 1, I applied for Uber. And I figured it out. I applied for Uber, and within 48 hours, I got approved to drive Uber. I'm in a meeting at my office here one day at 1:30, and I looked at my team. I said, look, I got to go. I got a fare because they knew what I did. And I went and got a fare on Uber. And and whatever, and basically got a job. But guess what? I got fired from that job. You know why?
Why is that?
I didn't log back in. So I showed up, I got hired, and I could have kept the job if I did it, if I would have did it. The second job I got online was with Wawa, which is a convenience store, huge convenience store up and down the East Coast. I don't think they have them in Illinois yet, and then the third job was McDonald's. Got hired on the line. Never went to work there. Never showed up for work at those jobs. But I got hired literally on a Zoom call with these people. Then I called them back and told them I was doing research. Thank you for your time, but my point was, if you have the opportunity, if you have the mental capacity, you can certainly get a job. And that's what I wanted to prove in this. So I write about this in the book called Get Off the Couch, where if you get off the couch and do something, just like I did, with Mrs. Bush and changed my mind about committing suicide, just like I did by seeing the Asian tsunami, and just like I did realize that nonprofits needed money, and how could I bridge that with them and help them and really do this. So, for you, man, keep doing what you're doing, keep rocking and rolling. I think you got a huge niche, and your clothing's right, your logo's right, and just keep on impacting people by doing the right thing every day, and nothing but the best.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Wayne. And I actually wanted to share a story with you that your story of going around with your grandkids with backpacks for people that were homeless sparked. So there was a gentleman that I had interviewed, because I'll try to do interviews with people who are experiencing homelessness to again just kind of help people humanize them. So like one of these phrases that I came up with is humanize, not otherize.
Nice.
And the people that are homeless they're otherized, and it's not exclusive to those folks, but it's like, oh, that's not me, that's not my loved one, like that could never be them, it must be their fault. So a lot of the work that we do is about trying to change the perceptions around it's not the individual's fault, it's a systemic failure, and we need a systemic solution to address that. But while I was interviewing this gentleman, he shared a story with me that he had a friend who was homeless, and they were very close to suicide. And one day a person just stopped and just had a conversation with them. They didn't have a ton of stuff to give them, they didn't have money to give them, but they recognized that as a person, and they stopped and had a conversation. And in this gentleman's words, it said it completely changed his whole aspect. And that person ended up not going through with suicide, and went on to continue living their life. And whenever I have an opportunity to speak, I was actually on Tampa Bloom and NBC Daytime in Tampa last year. I just encourage people to get involved in their community. Like maybe homelessness isn't the cause that you're passionate about, but there's 1.9 million nonprofits in this country, and I promise you, it's a cause that resonates with you, that aligns with your experience or a loved one of yours, and they could use your support. And so that's something that we're actually doing. So in addition to Cherry Willow Apparel, we have Cherry Willow Technology, which is still like pre-seed, it's startup, but we're trying to automate workflow for nonprofits to help give their staff the time to focus on doing the work rather than documenting the work. And then also make it easier for people to get connected with resources. So like, if you're homeless in a community and you don't know that there's, a food bank, or you don't know that there's mental health services that you can get for free because someone was passionate about that, how can you take advantage of those things? And so we're trying to make that process a little bit easier and have connectivity between, the nonprofits, and just kind of really lean into the community side and encourage people to get out there. And that's, again, like I said, anytime I have an opportunity, like I hope that my work inspires someone to take action in their community, to support any organization, or just introduce themselves and ask someone's name the next time they come across a person that's homeless. That action alone could save a life.
Yeah, and it goes back to my golden rule thing, or even just open the door for somebody. Or, you've heard about people buying stuff at Starbucks or whatever, but just doing something that treats people like you want to be treated. Every time I walk into a store, open the door up, and people are surprised. hold it open for them all to get in or whatever, or I'll say hi to somebody. My wife calls it the progressive commercial, where you've seen that where you're talking to everybody. And you know what? There was a woman sitting next to me on a flight going to Washington, D.C. to visit my kids many years ago, 5, 6 years ago, who was probably 25 years old, beautiful girl, physical therapist, told me that she literally was contemplating committing suicide. And first of all, there's a reason I was sitting beside her, and because she was able to talk to me about that. We've kept in touch. She's since got married. She's since had a baby, and she's since on a whole different trajectory of her life. So whether you're homeless or not, everybody needs a little attention. Everybody needs a little love, because there's a natural disaster happening in people's life every day. And just because you're homeless doesn't mean, that people used to say, well, homeless people are drunk or they're drug addicts. No, that's not true. There's homeless people that were CEOs of companies. There's homeless people. There's a lot of people in today's society that may be a couple weeks away from being homeless, with gas prices at $4 a gallon and everything else being so high. And, it happens closer in more reality than we all give it credit for or think about. And we label, like you said, I don't label, but I know people of my age label and say, oh, whatever. Well, you know what? A lot of the homeless people are veterans that fought for our country. And that should not be the case. We should get people the support they need to sustain and maintain and grow their lives in a bigger way. So, again, keep doing what you're doing, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And this is another stat that I'll share that I always share it anytime I have an opportunity to speak. It's a really good book called There Is No Place for Us. And the author spent 3 years in Atlanta with families that were impoverished and talked a lot about like working and homeless in America. And it's actually 40 to 60% of people who are homeless are actively employed and working, and they just are not earning enough money to be able to afford the rising cost of living. And to your point, gas prices, groceries, so many things have increased, and pay has not kept up with those increases. And that is a huge problem. Like, could you imagine, put yourself in the shoes of someone that is homeless, and they're working at McDonald's or Walmart, and they go back to a shelter at the end of the day, and they're sleeping amongst 300 other people in bunk beds. And there's still, a lot of people now in the shelters are senior citizens, where their retirement money or their Social Security, Medicaid, it's not enough to cover housing. And so we're seeing more and more people that are aging into homelessness, and that problem is not going to go away anytime soon. And like, to your point about labeling people that are homeless as addicts or drunks or whatever the case might be, I always frame homelessness as trauma, right? Like, everyone has experienced a form of trauma at some point in their life, and being homeless is traumatic. And now you're asking these people to navigate a system with so many guardrails and so many hurdles while being in this traumatic circumstance. And so that's again, part of the work I do is encourage you to see yourself if in that situation, and how would you respond? On the hardest day of your life, whatever that was, imagine you didn't have a roof over your head. Imagine you didn't know where your next meal was coming from, and you didn't feel that surrounded by people that were there to support you. That leads to a lot of issues, which then turns to numbing those things. And that's oftentimes how, the mental health conditions develop, by living in a constant state of stress and trauma, or they try to minimize that pain through self-medicating with drugs or alcohol. So it's just a lot of people don't really understand it. And, until you meet the people that it affects, you're like, oh, wow, they're the same as you and me, and like, that's what it's about.
Well, and that goes, I had a lady once that worked for me, and I didn't realize she was homeless until I came in early one morning to catch a 5 o'clock flight. She was sleeping in her car in the parking lot. And I called the office about 8 o'clock when I landed, wherever, I don't know what was going on, but I called the office. This goes back to the Soldier Souls days. And I asked my CFO, I said, why is she sleeping in her car? And why is she, in front of the building? And he goes, well, she's homeless. I said, why didn't you tell me? And I literally went and had my assistant, I give her the keys to a rental property I had that was empty. I said, you go stay there, you figure your life out. I'll be back in a couple weeks and we can sit down and talk and figure out plan B. And she ended up buying the house for me like 4 years later. I own her, financed it for her. I helped her out as in Nashville, Tennessee, and really proud of her because, she's somebody that was homeless. And unfortunately, nobody knew anything about it, which I was unhappy about. But once I found out, I did something about it, gave her a key, and lucky to have a rental property that was available. And then I was really proud to sell her and finance the house for her to. You never know. Again, there's a natural disaster happening in people's life every day. They don't have to be on the street. They can be sitting right next to you in the coffee shop, or like you said, in the next room. Who knows?
Yeah. And I was curious because it seems like the golden rule has really been a principle that's guided you and helped you create. How does that apply to business? Sometimes, business can sometimes be, more confrontational, or, there can be people trying to get the better of you. How do you go about handling that and kind of incorporating that into your work?
Well, it's a loaded question. The golden rule, the golden rule does have some guardrails. First of all, so the golden rule is entrenched in me, like you read about. And I told you I'm going to do a book about this. I think it's the hope of the world. I really do. I think if we all focus on the golden rule, we wouldn't be talking about Iran. We wouldn't be talking about all these problems we have. We would love each other, and people would love us. Okay. Number one. Number two. This is the hardest thing. Always take the high road. Meaning that in business, there's times I have to be tough. I got 2 legal situations going on right now where people just took advantage of it. And there's a limit to what you do. But you know what? If I did that to them and what they did to me or my company, they would deserve the same thing, or I would deserve the same thing. So, the golden rule is more than just being nice and loving and kumbaya and, give Matt a big bear hug when I see him and Jesse and everybody else on your team. But, there are limitations. But when people wrong you, I got a lot of critics. We all got a lot of critics. The more success you are, people are going to talk about you. They're going to lie about you. They're going to try to rechange history. Take the high road. Always take the high road. The truth never changes. You can't revise history. So you move on, you take the high road. And let me tell you, Matt, that's not always easy, but you do it. And the more successful you get, you're going to get your critics as well. But take the high road. The golden rule, take the high road and just really, really, really make a conscious effort. Just be the best person you can be every day with people all around you, whether you know them or not. There's a song out there, it's called Not Too Far From Here. It's probably 60 years old, but it says, you may not know their name, you may not know what they're going through, but God loves them just the same. And it says, basically what I'm saying, just treat people. You don't know what's going through their mind or what tragedy they have going on, but believe me, they do. We all do. You and I may seem like we have perfect lives right now. We got something going on, man. We got something going on. There's always something going on. But getting back to your point, take the high road. But you know what? Don't let people walk over you. Don't let people take advantage of you, and try to resolve things with a one-on-one conversation, not on Zoom, but face-to-face, and really try to resolve things that way. And sometimes, you know what? You may need a good attorney, especially when you're in business, to take care of some of the junk and the garbage that you have. So that doesn't mean that the golden rule doesn't mean that you're basically a target. The golden rule means treat people like you want to be treated, but you also at the same time, Matt, have to stand up for you, your principles, and who you are. And if somebody wrongs you, they either got to get it right or you do what you got to do.
Yeah, and that's something that I've continued to learn as just growing a business and bringing people in, because I have a tendency to give and give of myself, and I love to do that. But to your point,
Yep.
like there are people that will take advantage of that, and so I need to be cognizant of protecting myself so that I can continue to help the people that really need and appreciate the help, not that are just looking out there to exploit people that maybe are kind-hearted.
My strength and my weakness, and anybody that knows me, that really knows me, would tell you it's my heart. Who else would offer that guy a steak? My
Right.
wife to this day can't believe this, but there was a lady that we ran into a Haitian lady one time 5 or 6 years ago that basically her car broke down and this guy wouldn't loan her the jumper cables, but he loaned them to me to jump her car. And I told her to follow me. First of all, she turned her car on, it started. She turned her car off, it wouldn't restart. I said, she needs a new battery. I said, follow me to Advance Auto Parts down the street. And she goes, why? So, well, they'll test your battery out to see if it's okay or if it just needs water or whatever. And by the way, my mechanical skills are nothing, but I'm talking this game because I had experience with batteries or whatever throughout life. And she went there and she started crying because the guy said she needs a new battery. I said, you know what? I got this. I got this. So I bought her battery for her. And my wife to this day tells people that story that, I don't give to organized religion. I give to people. I give to people that are hurting on the side of the street, whether it be a meal or a battery or whatever, because I believe that every day we should make a difference in other people's lives by our actions, not our words. And you don't need to be a nonprofit to do that. You can just be a good human being by doing that, which is what you're doing and what you're building, what you're trying to really do out there with a population that's labeled, or a population that's stereotyped, that you're really making a big difference in these people's lives and your team's lives by exposing to them the reality is, hey, look, these are people also, and they matter to you, and they matter to God.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Wayne. And like just go out there and be the best person that you can be. And like there's gonna be bad days, and you're gonna have, like, as I talk with my kids, we'll have big feelings sometimes, and it may be you really get upset, but like do your best to kind of, like, as you said, take the high road, and forgive that person for, you don't know what they're going through. When someone's rude
Right.
to you on the street or rude to you in an interaction, like they could be having a really bad day. They could have just gotten some really terrible news, and like giving people the benefit of the doubt. And to your point, like you don't have to be an organization to do that. And I like that you said about like not giving to institutions, but giving to individuals. And I think
Yep.
that institutions are necessary, but they also exist to perpetuate their existence sometimes more than the people that they're supposed to be serving. And I think you
Right.
see that regardless of what the institution is. Like for me, one of the things when during COVID, like the universities, and they had all these endowments, and it's like,
Yep.
if there's ever a time where that would be useful, like, but most of they didn't, right? Because it's more of like it was just a number, and it was a contest. Like, oh, well, we have a $50 billion endowment at Harvard, like we're better than Yale, who has 40 billion. And
Right.
I think a lot of things come down to that, where it's like we have the resources, we have the knowledge, we have the ability to create a world or a society where people have their basic needs met. And
Yep.
that's housing, food, healthcare. And there's no increase in happiness that you can get when you go from not having your basic needs met to having them met. It doesn't matter what level of income you achieve beyond that. There's no hockey stick line that goes more drastically of an improvement and you're impactful in your life. And so for me, that's what I advocate for daily, and that's why I am working on Cherry Willow and connecting with amazing people like you to help others, encourage that to just take action, whatever it may be. But you have skills, you have value, and you can help others with that.
All they need, Matt, is what you're giving them, and I'm giving them, and your team, and my team, and millions of other people. Is they need hope. They need to know that there's a better day. They need to know that there's a tomorrow. And no matter how bad my today is, if I have a bad day, I go home, I get a good night's sleep, and guess what? Tomorrow morning, dude, I feel like a new person. I got a new perspective. What bothered me yesterday doesn't bother me today. What it makes me do is figure out how to figure out the problem and figure out the solution, to what happened yesterday. There's always a tomorrow. And I tell people that all the time when, I consult CEOs and, other stuff in business. And I'm like, there's always a tomorrow, man. Get through this, get some rest. Tomorrow's a new day. You'll come up with a solution in the middle of the night. Beside my bed on the nightstand is a notepad and a pencil. I'll come up with some of the best ideas at 2:00. In the morning, I'll write it down because I'll forget it in the morning. And I'll come up with some of the best marketing in the middle of the night. But my point is, if we can give people hope and they can see that what's killing them right now internally is not going to be there tomorrow, or it may be there tomorrow, they'll look at it differently. So continue beat that message in people's minds that there's always a tomorrow, there always is hope, there is a better way, and we're here for you, and we love you and treat you right, and just keep doing that, man. And this is, that's my scream to the younger generation. I told my daughter and son-in-law probably 5 or 6 years ago, when I die, I want my grandkids to have my heart. If there's one thing they have, they'll have my money, they'll have my house, they'll have my whatever, but I want them to have my heart. And that's why I'm teaching them to do little things like, buy lunch for people at school that they know that need it, or give out the backpacks and teach them at a young age that, man, we need to do more of that. Everybody needs to do that and figure out how we can be kind, versus being so much jerks, in the world, or other words you want to call them.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties back into our earlier conversation around the screens and just like online discourse. It's much easier to be a keyboard warrior and criticize someone from afar, but when you connect with someone in person, that there's not that level of critique. Most people, when they get with someone, they're not actually going to be as divisive, and I think it's people behind these screens. We miss that human connection, and when we're together and we're in the same presence with each other, you realize that like whatever barriers we may have in our minds created, that like, we can't communicate, those are dissolved just by being present with each other. And I think that is just what we need more of, and I think that's a great way that nonprofits can play a part in that. And so I'd love to ask you a little bit about, like, let's say if Cherry Willow, if we wanted to do a shoe drive, how would we make that work? And, how can any of the nonprofits and the audience or people in the community get involved in a shoe drive?
Yeah, well, a couple things. First of all, the funny thing is, you're going to laugh when I say this. If you call our office during office hours, somebody answers the phone. You know why? Because that's the goal. I don't want to call Bank of America or other banks or whatever and get a voicemail and say, representative, or zero. We treat people like we want to be treated. So we answer the phone, first of all. So what people would do is they would call our office here. There's about 11 people in sales and coaching. And what they would do, they'd walk them through it. They'd say, okay, we're going to provide all the materials, all the marketing materials. We're going to provide the bags, the rubber bands, and you need to go out there and collect gently worn, used, and new shoes. And then when you're done with this event, our trucks are going to pick it up from you, and then we're going to write you a check within 48 hours of getting it and weighing the product. That really is simple in theory, but there's a lot of work to it. The biggest challenge people have to have by doing the shoe drive fundraiser is they need to have the bandwidth of people that can go out there and collect bags, because we pay by the pound. And so if they can do that, and they got a school, they got a church, I've done many barefoot Sundays that I spoke for 15, 20 minutes to the congregation and asked them to leave their shoes at the altar. And when I first did this in Nashville, Tennessee, the pastor said, it'll never work. Love you to death. I'll give you the time on stage, which is a huge church. He goes, but it'll never work. 3 services later, we had a truckload of shoes. And people were leaving the church crying, literally crying, because I said, look, walk out of here. There's like 300 million children around the world were walking around without shoes today. It was 100 degrees that day. The people's feet were warm and hot and uncomfortable, but they realized that's the reality. That's how good we have it in America. We're part of the 1% of the wealthy. The other 99%, 98%, whatever the number is, close to that, don't have anything near what we have. So if we could share that with them, we could share the love, and if you could really focus in and hone in on homelessness like you're doing, make a difference in those lives, you will have raging evangelists, for your organization. The goal for you should be able to, in my opinion, one of the things to do is to have some homeless people, in turn, be part of your team. Be in turn,
Yep.
Grow and be able to have an opportunity to really go out there and help them do more with people that they live and they can speak their language.
Absolutely. And that's definitely something that we are working towards. And again, that's one of the reasons why I do the interviews with people experiencing homelessness, because a lot of times they don't feel seen or heard. And that action alone, because they're overlooked by politicians, because like a lot, they may have issues, they may have legal issues, so they're overlooked by everybody. And so just by giving them an opportunity to speak and share their story, everyone has a story, right? Everyone is carrying something that they're not sharing with everyone. They may share it with a few people, but for the most part, we're all carrying things alone. And unburdening yourselves is a tremendous way by just bringing people together and being vulnerable. And so I strive to lead with vulnerability. I actually have one other question about your book, but I know we're getting on time here. But I got the chills when you were saying about the church and walking out without the shoes, because through the act of giving their shoes away, you gave them an opportunity to walk in the footsteps of those that they're supporting, which is something that is really, really challenging for a lot of people to do. And that concept, like, wow, these people are millions of people every day are walking around like this all the time. They don't have any alternatives. So I just thought that was really a really powerful thing. And that's amazing. And that you were able to come up with that.
Well, it's on our website. It's part of the Funds to Orgs program as well. So basically in there's 5 different services. So we've actually pre-written the services. A friend of mine, John Ortberg, which is very famous in the evangelical world, wrote them. And basically there's one that talks about a loafer, one that talks about a sneaker, and it kind of gives all the services so the pastor can lead up to this whole big event they have. But you know what? In developing nations, most people don't have cars or transportation. A good pair of shoes is their transportation. So that's why we do what we do. That's why we fund nonprofits to collect them here locally so they can further their mission at Cherry Willow, or Cancer Society, St. Jude's, whoever that we're partnering with. We partner with St. Jude's worldwide and do a great job with them and love those folks because they do amazing work. But something as simple as that, by collecting gently worn used and new shoes, can fund the nonprofit, can help micro businesses around the world, and like I said, employ our 30-some people here, and then keep them out of the landfill. So there's all kinds of ways to raise money with different organizations, but this would really get your hands in there and get your hands dirty and makes you think, like you said, about walking out of church in the gravel of what 300 million children feel every day around the world without a pair of shoes.
Wow, that's amazing, Wayne. And thank you so much for joining us today on the show. Just one more time for the audience, if people do want to get in touch, obviously the phone, having a live person answer, that's already something that's pretty cool. That's a lot of people aren't doing anymore. But if you could maybe shout the websites out or any other information you'd like people to know before we sign off here.
Yeah, and I would say put in the chat as well, but it's funds, Funds, number 2, orgs, ORGS, funds2orgs.com. The phone number is 407-930-2979. And if you want to learn about my crazy world and my busy world and what I am involved in and et cetera around the world, just my website is Wayne, W-A-Y-N-E, Elsey, ELSEY.com. And you can learn more about what we're doing, and that gives you a real overview of what Wayne's world is all about, if you will. the impact we're making through our for-profit enterprises.
Well, I love that, Wayne. And I feel like there was a lot of other questions that I had that I'd love to connect about. I'm also I'm an aspiring author. I have a rough draft, of a book written, and I'm working through that process. And it just it's amazing that all the things that you've done, the different companies, the nonprofits, and 7 books. Is that right? That's pretty incredible.
I'm up to 12. I'm up to 12, and I'll have 14 by the end of 27. But Matt, how old are you?
34.
You're young, dude. You got the whole world ahead of you. You can write 100 books. You can make a bigger difference than I've ever made, or than anybody's ever made. You can do it, man. You got the age, you got the wisdom, you got the tenacity. Go get it. Don't let the world get you down. And remember, you matter. You can do anything you want to put your mind to it, and don't let the world get you down. Quote unquote from Mrs. Bush, Busch, and she reminded me in a misprint in a book when I first did it. But those words can make a difference in people's lives, just like it made a difference in mine. Thank you for having me. I appreciate your time, and maybe we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely. I would love that. And I think it's a perfect way to end. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for joining and participating in the show. And please, go out and check out Wayne's resources, all the incredible work he's doing. And I obviously can appreciate your continued support of our work here at Cherry Willow. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.